You start your day by posting a photo on Instagram, your hand curled around a coffee cup, sunlight spilling across the table. You share a quiet quote on Facebook, maybe a line from Rumi, something that sounds ancient, gentle, and profound. Don't grieve. Anything you lose comes round in another form. You don't explain it. You just let it hang, raw but polished, carefully designed to look accidental. You upload a soft video on TikTok, maybe a fragment of your morning ritual, maybe just your face, still and seeking. You call it presence. You call it healing. And maybe some part of you truly means it. But the rest is a mirror, a performance. You think you're grounding, you're curating, you think you're connecting, you're broadcasting. Each post becomes less about living the moment and more about proving it happened. A digital offering to confirm your evolution, your depth, your awakening. But underneath the performance of being seen lives the fear of disappearing without it. You've confused reflection for reality. And the part of you that once lived in silence now lives in the algorithm. This isn't presence. This is dependency on perception. Carl Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, who devoted his life to exploring the human soul, behavior, and the structure of the psyche, was deeply drawn to this very question. Why do we need others to confirm that we exist? Long before social media, Jung warned of the persona, the false face we craft to survive society, and the danger of believing it's who we are. And the paradox is brutal. The more you seek to prove your authenticity, the more counterfeit your soul begins to feel. This is the mirror trap. It doesn't just bend your identity, it replaces it. So now you've seen the surface, but you haven't faced the system. In this video, we'll uncover the 3 hidden layers of the mirror trap. The architecture beneath your self-image, your shadow, and your deepest fear. That without attention, you don't exist. You'll see how performance becomes identity, how even your goodness can become a disguise, and why the saint complex is the final mask and the hardest one to remove. And then, I'll show you how to break the mirror. Not just the one you scroll past, but the deeper illusion that's been shaping your soul. After this, you won't see yourself or your feed the same way again. You weren't born hungry to be seen. You didn't come into this world curating your image or performing your soul. That came later. Through the slow violence of conditional love, you didn't receive the love your nervous system needed just for being. So you learned to earn it by becoming what others could tolerate. You performed peace when you felt rage. You offered care when you needed it. You made yourself useful, quiet, agreeable, because your presence alone was never enough. And without even realizing it, your sense of self began to wrap around what was acceptable, not what was true. Carl Jung understood this wound. He wrote, "The greatest tragedy of the family is the unlived lives of the parents." When a parent is disconnected from their own soul, their child becomes the stage where repressed dreams and fears are unconsciously played out. That child stops being seen as a whole person and becomes an object to manage, mold, or mirror their parents' wounds. So you adapt. You become pleasing. You trade your authenticity for attachment. And this survival strategy lays the foundation for what Jung called the persona, the social mask you wear to navigate the world. Jung warned us, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is." It begins as protection, but over time, it becomes prison. Because the longer you live through this mask, the more estranged you become from the one who built it. The child who once needed to be loved becomes the adult who needs to be seen, not for who they are, but for the role they've mastered. And when social media enters the picture, the persona doesn't just survive, it evolves. It becomes an aesthetic, a performance of depth, a ritual of being watched. And that's when the mirror trap begins. Not because you're vain, but because you've never felt real without reflection. So now you know where it began. Not just with a mother or a father, but with the absence of unconditional presence. Love became something to earn. Performance became survival. But this didn't stay in childhood. It became a system. In the next part, we'll expose that system. The 3 hidden layers of the mirror trap that now shape your identity without your consent. Let's name the architecture of this trap, because Carl Jung did. First comes the inflated ego in disguise. You share your vulnerability, but it's curated. You reveal your wounds, but they're stylized. This isn't rawness, it's branding. It's what Jung warned against. Ego inflation through identification with the persona. You begin to believe you are the role, the wise one, the healed one, the mystic. And your ego grows not by truth, but by association with symbols of depth. Jung wrote, "Inflation is always a compensation for unconsciousness. When you don't know who you are beneath the image swells to fill the void. So you need others to mirror your supposed growth, to reflect you as enlightened, grounded, spiritual, not because you're evolving, but because you're afraid you're not. And that's not integration, that's illusion." Then comes the aesthetic shadow. You speak of your darkness, but only the parts that are fashionable. You show your grief, but only the parts that gain sympathy. You confess your fears, but in polished language designed to appear self-aware. But Jung defined the shadow as the thing a person has no wish to be. If you're choosing what part of your pain to show and filtering it for impact, you're not integrating your shadow, you're monetizing it. The spiritual ego displays wounds not to metabolize them, but to signal superiority through suffering. And beneath that caption lies the deeper panic. If I'm not seen as complex, will I be seen at all? And finally, the 3rd layer. Collapse in the absence of the gaze. When no one responds, the spiral begins. Not because you're shallow, but because you're dependent. Your sense of being becomes entangled with attention. You stop posting, not out of peace, but out of despair. Because if there is no mirror, there is no proof you exist. Jung called this phenomenon identification with the persona at the expense of the self. You mistake your digital reflection for your inner reality. And over time, the self, the quiet, sovereign, observing center, becomes buried beneath performance. What remains is projection, fragile, addicted to response. You've built your being from borrowed light, and now, in silence, you flicker. So now you've seen the trap from above. The layers, the symbols, the spiral. But one layer remains, the most seductive of all. It doesn't look like ego. It looks like love. It's the part of you that wants to be good. But underneath, it's the final mask, morality as manipulation. And it's the hardest to remove because you believe it's your soul. You think your desire to be seen as kind, helpful, or loving is your soul. But often, it's just your shield. A beautiful mask you learned to wear early, designed not from love, but from fear. This is what Jung called the moral persona, a socially acceptable identity built to hide the unacceptable truths within. When you weren't sure your full self could be loved, you offered the best version of yourself. Polite, soft, generous, supportive. And over time, that performance fused with your identity. You didn't just act good. You began to believe that being good was your only value. But Jung warned us, how can I be substantial if I do not cast a shadow? I must have a dark side also if I am to be whole. And yet, your digital self, the one you show to the world, doesn't cast a shadow. It's curated, aesthetic, safe. It doesn't offend. It doesn't challenge. It doesn't dare. It smiles and nods and posts soft quotes about healing while something deeper in you goes hungry, ignored, silenced, repressed. You've disowned your anger, numbed your healthy selfishness, hidden your deep craving to be important, to be admired, to take up space. Instead of integrating those drives, you buried them in service, in harmony, in pseudo-sainthood. And this is where the danger lies. Because this isn't presence. It's performance. It's not virtue. It's self-erasure wrapped in virtue signaling. You've become so morally polished that people stop seeing the human behind the kindness. And you start wondering if there's anything left of you at all. This isn't empathy. It's avoidance. It's the silent despair of someone terrified that real, unfiltered presence might be too much, or worse, not enough. And this fear becomes a compulsion, to rescue, to please, to soften every edge. That's the saint complex, a deep psychic split where your shadow is not denied, but buried under acts of goodness. Not because you're whole, but because you're still trying to be acceptable. The worst part, it works. You become easy to love, but impossible to touch. People admire you, but they don't know you. You disappear beneath your image, and slowly, your soul begins to dim, not from evil, but from excess goodness that was never real. We'll explore the saint complex more deeply another time. For now, just remember, no amount of virtue can save you from the loneliness of being a mask. But this isn't just about performance anymore. It's deeper than that. Because when your goodness becomes your mask and your presence is shaped by visibility, you're not just acting, you're projecting. And that's where the mirror becomes dangerous. Not symbolic, but structural. Let's go there. The mirror isn't just metaphor, it's archetype. In Jungian psychology, mirrors represent projection, the unconscious act of placing parts of ourselves onto others. You see your wholeness in their praise. You see your value in their attention. You confuse their gaze for your existence. But the tragedy is this: you don't just reflect outward. You abandon the inner world entirely. And when that happens, Jung says the psyche fragments. You become inhabited by the gaze, haunted by your reflection, and emptied of your center. This is not identity. This is collapse through overexposure. But once you see the mirror, you can't unsee it. You know now that the gaze has become your God, your proof of value, your phantom identity. But knowledge alone isn't enough. Awareness without action is just another performance. Now comes the real work. It's time to break the mirror. You don't fix this by trying to be more authentic. That still centers the gaze. That still makes the mirror your audience. What you need isn't authenticity, it's wholeness. Carl Jung called this individuation the sacred and often painful process of integrating the parts of yourself you've exiled, especially the ones that can't be applauded. You must reclaim what has nothing to prove. You must stop performing your soul and start embodying it, even in silence. First, You need digital silence. No posts, no stories, no mirrors, not as punishment, but as ritual. Because you need to see what emerges when the reflection is gone. Who are you when no one sees you? Let yourself become invisible, and watch which parts of you panic, which identities unravel, which emotions rise. That discomfort is not failure, it's the signal. It's showing you exactly where your being has become dependent on being perceived. Second, begin the work of shadow retrieval. Ask yourself, not with judgment but with surgical honesty, what you gain by being perceived as good. Ask, what do I lose if I am not seen? And which parts of me only feel real when someone else is watching? Write it, but don't perform it. Don't make your healing another content piece. This is not for public digestion. This is for soul reintegration. Remember, Jung defined the shadow not as your evil, but as what you refuse to be. Sometimes that's anger, sometimes it's desire, and sometimes it's need. Your hunger for recognition is not shameful, but it is not your identity. Third, reclaim the sacred act that no one witnesses. This is the opposite of display. Light a candle, speak aloud to no one, feel your grief, your joy, your rage, and let it pass through only you. No captions, no second camera, no need to convert it into insight. Just you in presence, with nothing to prove. This is where the self returns, where performance loses its grip and being begins again. And finally, the mirror ritual. Look at yourself, not to inspect, but to reconnect. Say it slowly, as many times as needed. I am not a performance. Again, I am not a performance. Let the nervous system unclench. Let the tension of being witnessed dissolve. Repeat it until your existence no longer hinges on evidence, until the center of your life moves from perception to presence. This is not a wellness hack. It is not spiritual branding. It is not something you can showcase. These are the first ruptures in the mirror, the cracks that let the real self return. They are the beginning of sovereignty, and sovereignty cannot be seen. It must be lived. Most people will never see you fully, and that is not a tragedy. It is liberation, because the true self, as Jung taught, does not emerge through performance. It unfolds through integration. You are not here to be consumed. You are not a spiritual brand. You are not a curated experience. You are not a reflection waiting for applause. You are a soul slowly remembering that it never needed an audience to begin with. So let the mirror crack. Let the light distort. Let the echo of attention fade. And in the stillness that remains, be someone no one can see but you. If this pierced through your curated self, subscribe. Not because you agree, but because something deeper in you remembered what it's like to be real. This channel isn't just content. It's a journey through masks, myths, mirrors, and meaning. Through the lies we've inherited and the truths we're still afraid to say out loud. You'll find other videos here that began that journey. Ones that crack the surface, name the pattern, and pull you back toward your center. Watch them, feel what rises, and stay with it. See you soon in the next video. No performance, just truth.